Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today, we're going to think about trends. What do we think is going to happen in the next year, in the next couple of years, in the next decade related to IT and infrastructure and the way we do our events? So if you've got ideas there, you can use Carne. Throw those in as questions, but they can just be ideas. And you can just throw those in, and we'll just make sure to tag them there. If you're not a Carne, of course, you can use askofficehours.global, and you see a little QR code right there. That's askofficehours.global, and you can put your comments in there as to where you think a lot of these trends are. You know, the way we do shows, the infrastructure, the IT. Where do you think it's going? So go ahead and throw those in there, and let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Alex, first up on deck is Douglas Carmichael asking, do you think we'll see greater use of software like mimoLive and vMix and the rest for lower-level sports, for example, instead of REMI or rolling a truck?
I go to Courtney.
You know, I think software-based switchers are great for people that are in high school that can't really afford, but hardware is getting cheaper and cheaper with the ATEM switchers and so on. So as we found when the TriCaster came about and people started using it for doing, high school or small sports leagues for doing capture and live transmission of that it crashes a lot in the middle of things. So you don't want a computer-based system or a software-based switcher because they crash a lot. Compared to something like a hardware switcher that only crashes every now and then, as we ATEM members know who have experienced the ATEM gray. So, but since the the hardware switchers are getting so cheap, I don't see a move to the more and more of the software switchers just for reliability's sake.
I will say that probably the place that are the most popular is for high school and a lot of smaller corporate production is because they're so flexible and you have a computer. To be fair to the software switchers, which again in a lot of my productions I use hardware. When you treat a computer like an appliance, the software switchers work really well. When you treat it like an all-purpose tool, the software switchers tend to not work as well. It's just a matter of, are you going to give it the resource? Are you going to say this laptop is the Wirecast laptop, or this laptop is the vMix laptop, or Mimo laptop, and that's all it does. Or the Mac Studio, and it just does that thing. They tend to work pretty well. It's when it's got a lot of other things going on as it really gets you. Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So the reality is that there's going to be hardware and software switchers in a lot of different situations, high-end and low-end productions. And I've seen many. There's a few Facebook groups that I'm on where these are people that are basically weekend warrior video people that are trying to do their kids' soccer game or do a high school basketball game, and they've got a couple different cameras, and they're using something like vMix, and they're also using these like the YOLO boxes and all these lower, really newer items that are coming into the system. It's showing that we're building the computers and we're getting the processors to the point where we can trust mimoLive or a vMix on there and bring that in from there. Another thing is if they're bringing people in through Zoom to help with any type of production, that's where a vMix will come in. I remember even with in the higher end, I remember when they talked about doing the CBS shows like Late Night and Late Show, that they use both vMix and Wirecast to not only bring in the audience, but also to get the show out to the masses. So I have a feeling it's just going to be a basic. If you have hardware, you're going to have a software switcher that can also complement there for different things.
And I don't know exactly we kind of went lower level sports we went to high school pretty quickly. There's also in Title IX, there's a requirement to cover all the sports or many of the sports for college. And the way Pac-12 did this is not so much with software, but it did do REMI. So exactly what Douglas is talking about, which is that the big football games still have broadcast trucks, right? So the big games all have a series of broadcast trucks that may cover those. But as you went into the smaller court, field hockey, and other things like that. You ended up in these REMI systems, and what they did is they have these little transit bands, and they would pull up and they would take 5 camera sources, the audio, the score information, so on and so forth. And because all the colleges are on internet too, they were able to put very, very, very low latency, like switch level low latency. And sometimes they were actually using the switch to go back to San Francisco. And in San Francisco, then they have hardware, so they have dream catchers instead of EVSs, and but switching and audio and everything else. Sometimes the commentators were remote. A lot of the commentators wanted to be on site, so they would be there and they put their audio, they package their audio in with that return. And so that was REMI, and they were, the numbers were, I think it was like 2,200 games a year, doing it that way. So by centralizing all of that, they don't, it's a very small package that's really easy to load in and relatively inexpensive. I don't know what the exact number was, but I think that the coverage was, less than 10K per show. So it is and that really got, made it doable for them. And so I think that REMI does make sense, and for them, it definitely made more sense than trying to even do something small. Sometimes the REMI makes more sense because you reduce all the complexity on the edge, and then you bring it back. The big thing that they were able to do that the average person can't do is get that bandwidth. So how do you get the bandwidth you need to broadcast the event? And so that's the trick there. Next question.
Next one in from Guy Cochran in Seattle, USA. Canon spotlights the MS500 ultra high sensitivity camera as one to note at CES. Where would one use a camera such as this?
Yeah, it's really interesting. This is a camera this was released before last NAB, and this falls into their ME20, ME200 series of cameras, which are very high ISO. So the Canon, the ME20 is about 4 million ISO. The ME200 is about a little over 1 million ISO, as I remember it off the top of my head. You can, with the ME20, you can see at night. Like, you can see things that you can't see with your naked eye. It is an incredible low light camera. Now, what they did there with those two cameras is that they had a full frame sensor that was that they didn't. Well, there's a full frame sensor for the ME20 and a Super 35 for the ME200, but they're only 1080p. And so the result was very large photo sites, which allowed them to get this low light system. The MS200, I believe, looking at it, is a 1-inch sensor. So they're really changing the technology to go to this low light. And they're really the only ones doing this outside of military applications. There's definitely some military solutions that are similar in their sensitivity. But for the most part, I think the only ones that I've seen consumer-wise have been Canon as far as these super low light. What I don't know is how the MS200 compares to the ME20. The MS200 looks like they simplified the interface a fair bit, the hardware interface to it. It's smaller. It's a 1-inch sensor, but I don't know if I couldn't tell from the website whether the sensitivity had changed dramatically from the ME20, either up or down. The price point is about the same as the ME20. It's $21,000. I think the retail was 26 or 25, but I think B&H is selling for 21, and the ME20 is kind of in that $20,000 range. So that's the. It's also a really funny guy put this up yesterday. I looked at it. It's like a magazine. Like CES does this thing where you can turn the pages like a magazine. I don't know if that's necessarily what I would want, but it was kind of a pain to read. but we've kind of found our way there. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a box camera with interchangeable lenses, and here's the article. It says that this MS500 has a 0.001 lux sensitivity, which is 1/10,000th of a lumen, is enough to you can actually shoot color video under starlight at about a mile away or something. It's incredible without any kind of, or maybe moonlight. Incredible to return for surveillance, to return color, a color image at a distance. So guess where it's going to be used?
Well, no, but there's other companies. I think there's the other cameras like the X27, which is similar in how it approaches that. Definitely where they're promoting it is towards security and towards a lot of those types of things. I don't think this one is necessarily it's probably not going to stand up to military needs, but for security, it worked pretty well. I will say we used the ME20. We were working on a project that was using an ME20 in Tanzania, and there were hyenas, and we had to warn the camera operator that the hyenas were getting very close, because it was dark. The camera operator couldn't see the hyenas. The hyenas could see him, and the camera could see them. It was like one of those things. Like the hyenas are only a couple feet away. You really want to, watch out because you couldn't quite tell where they were. And so incredible. And this was before the sun had come up, before there was any light from the sun, and we were seeing that information. They're really kind of an amazing camera. We use them in theaters to get returns from the audience because you could turn all the lights off and still see everybody. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida, asking, I would like to create a community for local photographers on Discord. What are your go-to resources for Discord admin? Thanks.
The best way to do this right now is what I would say is to do it, go through the process of it, talk about it in our Discord. We built ours. The one thing I will say is build it slowly. We did that, and we still ended up with an enormous number of channels and so on and so forth that we have there. But the biggest thing is as you build it, don't add things that you think people will use. Really add things that you get a call for, and do it slowly. The other thing I would say is that. I think some people will argue with me, but I think that requiring real names and locations, people can make that up, but I think that it definitely has improved it improves every Discord that I'm on that does that. When people are accountable for what they're saying, they tend to tone down a little bit. Doesn't mean that there aren't arguments, but there's a lot less. So we don't give, as some people have found here, we don't give you the ability to start posting until you've fixed your name. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the real name thing, it seems like a no-brainer. I get it, gamers and their handle. And, I used to be Edit Ace 2000 until, the 2000s. No, is there a way in Discord that you can search for a channel? Because the long list of channels to me is just mind-numbing. I scroll, and I don't read so well, so I can't find anything.
Yeah, I don't. I guess it all depends on how people use Discord. I'm not conscious to the channels. So what I do is on Sunday, I just reset my channels. All the channels of servers I'm normally in, I just reset them. I'm never going to get to that. It's otherwise it just overwhelms you. I'm in 25 servers. And so I just reset the channels. I just go through, it's like a Sunday thing. I'm just and I just reset them all so that I have a clean slate for the next, and then I'm not really looking for specific subjects. I'm looking for bold. I'm just heat seeking. If I'm going into it, I wonder what's going on there. I don't really look for. I'm not trying to find a channel. I just look at what's been bolded. Now, what I do is I roll up all of my all the groups. I just roll them all up. So you hit the little arrow, so it pulls them all up. So they only open when there's something in them, and so it kind of stays very compact.
That's a good tip. I like that.
So they're all, because and so they're all there and they're all closed and they only open when they when you're in them, and so then you just see what's there, and they only show the channels that are live. And so anyway, that's how I manage. I mean, I'm in again a lot of channels, a lot of conversations. I probably spend more time in Discord than I should, ours is a very technical channel. I'm in another creator channel that has that has sections, but they're very general. The advantage of that is that there's less channels. The disadvantage of that is that it's very hard to have a thread. What ends up, I know Discord has threads, but they're kind of a pain. But what's really nice is that with the discussions in ours, that if you get into a discussion about something, it can go on for a little while. Whereas if you have more generalized channels, you start talking about something and someone else throws something else in, and then someone else throws something else in, and then you get into these people are skipping over each other, and I don't particularly like that much. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, to answer Chris's question specifically, you can. Now, whether you're using the Discord app or you're using the web interface, if you just hit Command-K, that brings up a search bar. You type in the name of the channel, and it'll take you right to it.
There you go. Next question.
Next one in is a QR code question from Dan Shaw in Columbus, Ohio. Has the panel been able to make the Stream Deck work on the Mac with multiple users? Do I need separate accounts and profiles? Right now, the two Mac accounts share the same account, and I'm finding that the buttons fail when switching users.
Go on, Alex.
Yeah, that sounds like a messy situation. My recommendation would be if you can find a separate computer, I would suggest moving to BitFocus Companion. When I moved away from the Stream Deck app, it removed a lot of limitations and problems like this. So, one of those, cheap Melee PCs that's a couple $100 or an older Mac Mini. But if you move to BitFocus Companion and put it on that, it adds so much more flexibility. And if you've got buttons that have to trigger and open specific local folders or files on that computer, there's an add-on called Vicrio, and there's a little app you can install. It works on both Windows and Mac OS. It's called Vicrio Listener, and that will basically communicate back to Companion so that you can trigger and open local files that are on that specific computer, and that works really well for me.
Go, Jeffrey.
So yeah, everything I would highly suggest. First of all, if you can put it on another machine and bring it in that way, that's perfect. And of course, BitFocus Companion. The other thing is there's a lot of security in Macs, and that's where the failure usually happens. And then you basically have to set it up for each one. But you can do a couple things to link the two profiles together. Like for instance, I have two profiles because I have two different clients, and I don't want things to mix over back and forth. But you can also set up shared folders on the Mac. So at least you can save the profiles into the shared folders so it can move back and forth between one and the other. You can also have it on an external drive that you could plug in and then share from there. But you're risking, if you don't have that drive, that you're risking whatever's from your profile that you haven't saved onto the desktop. So the shared folder would probably be the best option right there. Other than that, sometimes you just have to go in and make some changes, especially if it's involving other programs that don't talk back and forth between profiles.
Next question.
Eric Hers from Hartford, Connecticut asked, will media over QUIC replace WebRTC for low latency live broadcasting?
Replace is always a big word. QUIC, I think, is I believe what he's referring to is QUIC UDP internet connection, and it is something that I believe Google is working on to improve on what WebRTC does. I mean, WebRTC is already 12 years old or 13 years old or something like that. So, but very few things in the internet get replaced. They just there's just more protocols to support. Some things support this one, some things support other ones. So I don't know if it's going to replace it. In many cases, it's already being replaced. Like we talk about Zoom being WebRTC, but it's not really. Like Zoom took what WebRTC is and made it their own and did other things with it and have added a lot of special sauce to it, which is why it works so well. But so I think that it's not a So I think it'll be interesting to see. By the way, I will say that regardless of that, Eric asked this question. Hopefully we put this in the links that we keep there. It's a really good article. I don't know if it's going to replace it, but I do like the article. So anyway, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the problem with, it's a faster protocol, and so it's great for low latency stuff. I don't know if it's quite as robust as TCP maybe. The problem with, because it's extensible, it's not frozen in time like TCP is. It's not ossified, as they say. So the fact, anytime you develop a protocol that can be easily modified or changed or adapted, it's very difficult to make it a standard because it's a moving target. We ran into this problem with XML file formats that required each manufacturer would make up their own schema for exchanging metadata, and there was no commonality between any of them because they all wanted to do it their own way. So making a standard that was easily interchangeable between machines became problematic, and I hope that QUIC does not suffer the same thing because it is not stuck into a single protocol that can be adopted by everyone, which usually takes about 5 to 10 years for a protocol to spread evenly amongst all users. And it has to be frozen enough so that anyone can build it into their hardware without fear of it being changed.
Well,
so
yeah, and I don't know if it needs to be. I mean, again, it's something that if Google decided it wanted to just make that what meetings sit on, then it would be done. It would not be a standard, but it would be definitely what Google uses. So it doesn't need. I don't think it needs a lot of interoperability.
Well, I think Google's using it now for about 50% of their communications between Chrome and the servers.
Yeah, so I think that there, it does sound like a second hour. So that I'm having someone, it's something we don't know enough about. So stay tuned for that. We'll put that in the list. Next question.
And it's from John Preto in Las Vegas, Nevada. Has anyone seen the Dante Virtual Soundard App disappear from your PC? Mine did today. Is there a DLL by an EXE and it's not listed in my products at Audinate?
Go ahead, John.
Sorry about the typo there. She should say but. There's a DLL on this is on a PC. I've been running the same LED panel that Alexander uses, and I use DVS to run that over to the X32. Running DVS for 2 years, logged in today, and it's gone off my machine. And then when I logged into Audinate for your products listed, the license is absolutely gone. So I was just wondering if anybody else has seen that behavior.
That is crazy.
It is crazy.
Like to have the app just disappear and the license. Gone. The fact that both the license and the app disappeared at the same time would lead me to call Audinate.
I did.
Okay, yeah. Let us let us know when they get back to you, because I'm super fascinated by the fact that if for some reason they're actually able to, or their system is capable of removing your software from your hardware, that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Like that's like not okay. Yeah. It's okay to turn the license off. It's not okay to get rid of the app. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question 2 steps back from this, and that is it better to use the Virtual Soundard app or the little Dante Avio modules? Are they more reliable either way?
I would say that the Avio modules are more reliable, but much more limited because it's only a couple channels. Like so if you're only sending a couple channels out of your computer, that's fine. But like I have Soundcard on all these computers, and I've got 32 channels to work with. Like to go back and forth between the computers, and so I'm not the Avios are very, very limited to what they can do, but they are more stable. Like there are times when I have to restart Soundcard on a computer. Usually not in the middle of a show, fortunately, or middle of what I'm doing. But it does happen that I go, I got to just turn it off, turn it back on again, and just kind of kick the machine, and it works fine. But that happens maybe every couple months. It doesn't happen very often, but all my machines have Dante Virtual Soundard, and they're all kind of tied together as needed. But I couldn't do that with the Avios. Would be a huge mess, to try to figure that out. But when we need to tie them to specific pieces of hardware, they're perfect. Next question.
Max Schiffman from Escondido, looking to annotate Keynote slides on a touchscreen monitor for a presentation live on stage. Any software solutions that the presenter can use on stage to annotate and advance on a touchscreen TV? Thanks.
If you ping me in Discord, we can talk. So this works with touchscreens as well. so what I just showed you there, but it's not released yet. It's in beta. So if you ping me there, it's not out, but it's just a USB input. So I'm using a Wacom tablet to do this, but I've already tested it on touchscreens as well. It's just a point of location. So that's the only one that I know of that would sit over top of Keynote. The only problem is you would still need a switcher in line to do that. Like you still have to key it some way. The one thing to note is that I don't know any way to do this with a touch monitor. Note that if you run your Keynote on an iPad, you can draw over top of your slides. So the iPads with the pencils will draw on top of the slides, whereas you can draw all you want on your iPad. I don't really think about touchscreens anymore because I was sitting in an event where people were using touchscreens to draw, and I realized that we were bringing the past into the future or into the present, which is that we somehow feel like we have to look at a board and touch it and draw on it. I'll argue that that's an old way of thinking. And moving to the iPad or moving to the system that I use here with Mac Minis or Video Pencil, what you're doing is you're allowing yourself to continue to look at the audience and still annotate the things that you're talking about. There's not any reason for you to have to turn your back to the audience, and draw anymore. There's, it's this old, we always have to be careful of like looking at why are we doing this, and we see it on TV and everything else. It's because people on TV are trying to do old things into the new thing, and so I don't think you need to show someone with their finger on a screen. So that's what I'll argue there. You can do it, and there's tools that'll let you do it. Over Keynote, it's hard because it takes over the computer. So you need something you need the monitor itself, like a Planar will have its own system that'll do that if you look at it. So Planar, Planar, I believe has its own marking system that can sit over top of the whatever you're running there. As far as forwarding the screen, then I would probably use a separate tool for that. But the iPad is really good for it. You can just sit there and you can just swish by and it'll just go to the next slide, and then you can draw over anything you want with a pen if you're willing to give up the screen touching thing. Next question.
Chris Fenwick in Half Moon Bay, California, and right here on our panel, right there, have we discussed the latest Strada released video about the depth of field mapping and the iPhone 15?
We haven't. Chris, have you looked at it?
It's super interesting. So, Michael did this. He does this whole deep dive about, should we be shooting on the phone, blah, blah, blah. And then he said that he did a couple of videos. His episode 9, 10, and 11 were about, we're going to shoot with the 15 and some of the pros and the cons of it. And then he says, and then Apple did their behind the scenes and told us that they did the Keynote with the 15. And then he goes into this deep dive thing where he's using some AI magical stuff to generate a depth map to apply a defocus that's better than the cinematic mode that the iPhone does. And this is like, I can't imagine, you're going to love this video. I ran into this video at like 2 o'clock in the morning and I almost texted it to you, Alex. But you should watch this. It's super interesting.
I'll be really interested to look at it because the phone itself generates a depth map. So it not just the cinematic mode, but I mean, it will, with that video, it's outputting a depth map. If you're in portrait mode or in cinematic mode, it's doing a depth map. So he's using AI to do the depth map, I guess. Okay, yeah, it's using so this is kind of what Google does in a lot of cases. Is it's using the parallax to generate. So it's using the right. It'll be interesting to see, because you can extract that depth map out of the movies. The cinematic ones. Because what's interesting is that if you shoot something in cinematic mode, you can actually rack focus between the shots. But what he may be looking at is one of the advantages of the problem with the cinematic mode is I don't think it gives you the 10-bit ProRes. So what he's doing is he's comparing this to the same shots done on a red Monstro. Yeah.
And he's showing the iPhone
that's good.
Broad focus, iPhone cinematic, and then the Monstro. And then he's taking that depth map and he's creating a plugin to do a better version of cinematic, which if it can be done, clearly Apple will Sherlock it, and they'll just do it better.
Maybe.
But it's...
But what I will say is, by the way, his frame looks great.
Yeah.
He's got a great background, a great setup. He's got a little, so it's good. It's good. We're going to get him on. We'll bring him on, have him explain it to us himself. I
would love it if you take the 13 minutes to watch this and report back what you think of this tomorrow.
Absolutely.
There's your homework for the night.
Noted. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, Samsung has introduced a new OLED gaming monitor for 2024. Would you trust any of these as a main studio monitor?
Go ahead, Alex.
Well, it's really amazing to see how a lot of technology has come down in price over the years, especially with monitors. Would I trust it? Well, it depends. What's your use case? If you're going to use it for color-related accuracy, I would probably trust a display that is color calibrated. I actually like the Asus Pro Art series, and I'm just going to cut actually to that here. They actually now have a variety of these displays, all the way from 1080p to 4K, and they actually have an OLED version of this. Now, the cool thing about these is they come Kalman calibrated from the factory, and they support, like you can see some of the specs here are pretty high, 99% DCI P3 HDR10. So these ones are really, really good, and they're going to give you more color accuracy. The other thing that I noticed immediately about this Samsung display is the 400 nits brightness seems really low for me, especially if you're going to do HDR work. I'm not sure why anybody would use an HDR monitor that only had 400 nits. That seems a little low in brightness.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I don't think I'd use them in a professional situation. For gamers, they're great because they're, I think, 360 hertz refresh rate. And because they're OLEDs, they have a very fast, each little OLED pixel can turn on and off very quickly, and that's what allows them to run these high frame rates. But if you're using them in a professional situation, there's a lot of equipment that can't deliver that 360, especially if you're going to be distributing that video amongst multiple monitors. So if your source can't go at 360 frames per second refresh rate, and you're stuck at 60 or God forbid 30, you're going to see a lot of flicker in those images, and it's going to drive you crazy. So in a professional situation where you might be running through a router or a distribution a source to get to that monitor, no, it's not a good idea to use something with that fast response time and refresh rates. These are really designed more for gamers who like to brag about their refresh rates, even though they probably can't see the difference between 240 and 360 at all.
Yeah. I think I can buy into seeing the difference between 120 and 240. Over 240, I'm hesitant to think that you can see the difference there. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, color accuracy good, brightness bad.
Next question.
Next question from Andy Korkendorfer from Viera, Florida. Thoughts on the eye comfort monitors? And there's a link to it right there.
I think it's good marketing. Eye comfort. I don't know. I mean, if you set your stuff correctly, it probably would be comfortable. I looked at it. I didn't see anything in there that I felt like was specific to, higher refresh rate might make a difference, but I didn't really understand it. Go ahead, Courtney.
I didn't read the article, but a lot of times they say that, a warmer backlight will be more soothing to the eyes. I don't know about the color accuracy of it, but maybe that's what they're talking about, using a tungsten balanced backlight instead of 9300 Kelvin.
I'd have to see more data to believe it was anything more than psychosomatic. Next question.
Daniel Partridge from Rochester, Minnesota, looking for ceiling mount options for Ethernet drops in the shop. Would like retracting reel, but they're all the way more than I want to spend, $300 to $600. Anybody have an alternative idea? Something like a lighting pantograph, maybe? 10-foot ceilings.
Interesting. So I'm very curious how you're using those, because hanging the wires down is not, on a variety of different levels, is not something that I would do on purpose. Now, I've definitely seen some that will come down for, all the cables will come down to a desk or something like that. But even then, I don't really maybe properly appreciate that. Usually what I do is I want to figure out a way to, especially if I want to run a lot of cables, I try to figure out how to get the floor up and then move them along the floor. But I don't think I don't like the mess. That's the problem that I have. So I just visually don't want to see cables hanging from the ceiling. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's actually a practice that, especially if you're building pop-up offices, that if you're running all the cables from the ceiling, they're just going to drop straight down, and then you have this mess of cables that is always ugly, and I've always tried to clean it up, maybe put like a little scrim around it or something like that. I did put a link in Mukana for something on Amazon that is retractable Ethernet cable for about $50. What you're going to probably have to do is you're going to have, once you start pulling on it, you're going to have a point where you want to put a stopper on. Otherwise, it'll go all the way to the ceiling, which means that you'll probably, if you can't reach the ceiling, then you'll probably have to get on a step stool to get to it. And it's also dependent on what type of ceiling we're talking about. If you're bringing the cable in from the upper level through like a crawl space or something like that, through a hole, or if you're going to be tacking on cable that going up the wall over the ceiling down, or if it's a drop ceiling or anything like that. If it's a drop ceiling, there are some drop ceiling clips that you can get that will help organize the cable.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, retractable cables are always a problem. Either if it's a spool, you've got to have a commutator connections because that cable is spinning and it has to maintain a connection to the other end that's not spinning. So it has to be their commutator connection. Otherwise, you're twisting the cable 10 times to get it down to your level. And even the kind that have a pantograph, you're going to if you're doing it a lot, if you're just going to move a desk, like Jeffrey says, for open office type situations where they want to be able to reach an Ethernet cable down to any desk, maybe 2 6-foot sections that bend in the middle and then retract, fold and then clip up at the ceiling might be a solution so that you're only bending the cable at one point every now and then. Any frequent uncoiling, this is the same problem with coiled cables. Coiled cable, when you pull it down to stretch it out, it has to unwind like this, and that puts a lot of torque on those connections, especially crimp-on connections, or they're going to break pretty quickly. So I'd advise against it. Retractables.
Yeah, every time I walked into offices that have all these cables hanging down to all those desks, and I just look at it like that would just make me crazy. Like I wouldn't want to work in the office. So I just don't know, like the hanging down cable thing. I know it provides some flexibility, but I think really hard about that. Next question.
John Richardson in Florida asks a question, any exciting predictions for the video world expected to come out of CES?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, we already talked about Canon and what they're doing. There's a lot of phone companies out there, the Chinese Android market, that will be doing a lot of debuts of new phones. And, of course, they're probably going to be competing with the cinematic look and feel of the iPhone 15 as well. I know that PTZ Optics is going to be at CES. They were there last year and we're really happy with their results. They said in their emails that they're going to be showing off something that's new and exciting, so that will be interesting to see. Other than that, I don't know of too much other video stuff unless it's going to be in Eureka Park. And, of course, the XR, the glasses, are going to be a big thing. I've already seen about 4 or 5 companies. It's been tough because the emails haven't been coming out until like a week ago, trying to schedule different booths to go to. So, but I am seeing some cool video options that will be there, and I wouldn't be surprised if I get a ton more in the next day that I haven't seen yet.
I go, Courtney.
Yeah, I noticed it's curious that Sony has this year announced that they will not be showing any TVs at CES once again. They didn't last year either. Which is interesting. Either they don't have a whole lot to show, or it's just not they like to make a bigger splash with a single announcement later where they can gather more press attention rather than the holocaust of information releases that happen on the first day of CES. So maybe that's the reasoning. I find that peculiar. And I don't know if anyone out here is a secret developer for Apple's Vision. That I don't think they've released the embargo, so anyone who's developing software for release on that platform will not probably be able to show it since it hasn't been released yet.
Yeah, Apple's kind of the Vision Pro is kind of hanging over CES, so where everyone's like trying to figure out how they're going to fit into that model, but they haven't quite. But no one knows exactly what's going to happen there. I think that one of the side things of streaming that has come up is that companies can get their own press, and so it's harder for conferences. Like I think Sony, I know that Sony spends a lot of time on their. I don't necessarily agree with all their choices, but they spend a lot of time on their press, on their live streams and their events around their products and so on and so forth. And I think that they would rather start moving people towards their events, their release events at their own schedule, kind of like Apple, than feel like they need to deliver something at a conference, especially. CES, for those who go to it, and especially those, I've done a lot of events at CES. It's just brutal because your entire Christmas is gone. like everything is gone. And it's such a horrible date, to do this in. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see it this year, but I have to say Sony has really set a new high bar for a sub $10,000 camera that has global shutter with the new A9 III, and I have to say that is a trend. I would love to see that technology trickle down in more affordable prosumer cameras. I mean, for most of us hobbyists that maybe you're into making short films and would love a camera with global shutter, an $8,300 camera might be out of your budget. So I would love to see the day where we get $3,000 cameras with global shutter.
Yeah. One thing that I do think you'll probably see at CES is bigger monitors, bigger TVs. So the TVs, I think that Linus Tech Tips showed a 115-inch TV that wasn't sellable in the United States, I think, but they were showing, they somehow imported it in. The big thing there is that the TVs are going to really open up the opportunity. It really puts a lot of pressure on theaters, because once you get to 85-inch, 90-inch, 100-inch TVs, when you think about how far away you are from the screen and how big the screen is, at about 80 to 100 inches, depending on what kind of screen you're comparing it to, it's about the same aperture as a theater. And now that the 85-inch TVs are, so it's about the same angle. The screen is filling the same amount of your view at 10 feet away as it does in the theater. Sorry, viewing angle. Yeah, it's filling the same amount of your viewing angle as it would in a theater that's further away. And so, it didn't happen, that has been creeping up on us. But now that we see 85-inch screen TVs for $800 and $900, we're going to see the 100-inch, and this is an incredible. We want to watch this over the next 5 years. This is an incredible amount of pressure on the theaters, because you have all these streamers that are doing really high-end, production, and you have screens that can support them and arguably look better than the same thing in most theaters. Not all theaters, but most theaters. And if you get a sound bar, it's better than sound in most theaters. So the thing is that the people will say, well, people want to. I saw this article with someone who, I don't remember which theater owner it was, but they were like, people really want that group experience of watching a movie. I don't think they do. I don't agree with that in the most part. I think that, I hate watching movies with random people. Hate
comedy is good.
Yeah, I just don't watch a lot of comedy, so that's probably why. I don't really. I watch a lot of stand up, but I can do that at home. But I hate it. I just hate people. I went to see Godzilla at -1, and it was perfect because there was 3 people in the theater, and then
Alex just hates people.
Nine kids sat down behind us, and didn't ruin the movie, but definitely reduced the quality of the experience by being themselves. And so so I think people are, especially with the prices of everything going up, I think people are going to more and more be doing it at home. So I think
it's also going to affect the home theater projector market more than anything else, because for large screen home theaters, it's so much better to have a direct view 100-inch screen that you can watch in daylight and not have to darken the room. And for Alex's theater experience, maybe they will come up with a little device that sits behind your seat in your home theater and kicks the seat every now and then.
I don't need that. Jeffrey, real quick.
Yeah, LG is actually debuting the Ultra Gear, which is a switchable dual hertz monitor. So you can watch a movie, then turn around and play a game, go from 240 hertz all the way up to 480 hertz, I think was the numbers. Nice. But that's in the video technology. That would be pretty cool for video creators.
My Apple TV is set to do native to whatever format it is, and you wait for 2 seconds every time you jump between something because it goes, oh, this is now 60, oh, this is 24. Next question.
Matthew LeCount from Oakland, California. When shipping cases for travel jobs, what is the preferred method? Big name companies, same flight you're on as media baggage.
Go ahead, Chris.
I've done everything except for what's the one company, Alex, the Air Ride super fancy pants shipping company?
Rocket.
Yeah. So I've never done Rocket, but I've put my gear on trucks that were managed by the production companies. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of stuff people don't think about when it comes to shipping. And there's people that are really bad at packing trucks. I had a legit like 80s era Anvil case come back with a hole in the side of it because for 3,000 miles, somebody else's caster was pounding up against the side of mine. My preference, and again, I just edit. I travel with my gear. I travel with a large, this is when I used to fly. I don't fly anymore. I fly with a large system that I like to sit in front of, and I carry a small system for when the large system gets damaged or doesn't show up.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we have used Pelican cases. I think our record for one show is 42 Pelican cases checked by about 8 people, to go to Japan. And it is the cheapest way to move literally a ton of gear or half a ton of gear overnight to Japan is to check it all with you, especially if everyone's gold, because you get each person gets three cases under 70 pounds for free. And so if you have a lot of people that are traveling in your company, you can move gear really quickly in that area, and it's only $70 a bag on media rate. And so you get this, if you buy it and do retail, but if you get a media badge, which you can print, you can pay $70 a Pelican case, for international, 50 in the United States.
So up to what weight?
The media pass will get you up to 100 pounds. So it's in the United States, United Media Pass is $50 a bag up to 100 pounds and up to 24 bags per person to do that. So we've done one person, our record was 23. 23, and they were really salty when they got to the other side. So anyway, with 22? They were really upset when they got to the other end. I only had 22. You can do that. You really have to build around some of what we call bags are actually our own dollies. Carts. We use our own carts. We use cart masters because they're indestructible. You fold them up into almost nothing and you check them. And so we might show up with 4 of our bags might be cart masters, and then the carts, and then because that way we know exactly how many bags and what bags go on what, and then we know that they'll all fit. I take a picture of every cart at every airport anywhere so that I know whether it has a front lip. That's the big thing I want to know is this a flat lip airport or a front lip airport? Because the front lip airport just is a disaster for you to fit cases into. And so those are all the things that you can do, but you can, and as you get bigger, you can start building your kits around that. At some point, you start getting into shows where you can just put these in cases, in racks, and send them out. And that's when we start using Rocket. And the main thing is that I've used a lot of different things, but Rocket is the best, like by far. Like I had gear. They had we got 2 feet of snow over 3 days in Davos when we were doing something at the World Economic Forum. I had sent something over Rocket that said it was going to be there at 4 p.m. and it was there at 3:59. Like with snow, traffic, whatever. A big truck showed up, and I had to warn the guys that it's going to be on time. They're like, it's not going to be on time. There's all this snow. Showed up on time. And so Rocket is the way to do that. One thing I will say is that you have to be very careful of how large your racks are. So you can't go over 55 inches, and I typically go 52 inches. And the reason for that is that they can't put them in the containers otherwise in the planes. And so it doubles the cost of your shipping. So you can't have long rack cases. And so those are the kind of things you have to kind of think about as you start to go down that path. But and there's other shippers out there, but I will say that Rocket just makes it go away. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, traveling with equipment as baggage on domestic air and international air flights is becoming more and more difficult because of the limitations on batteries and weight. With the media, I think you get up to 70 pounds per bag. Is it that you?
That's 100.
It's now 100. Okay,
it's been 100 for
But if you don't have that media baggage bypass, I think it's 50. And then they start charging you through the nose for it. It goes up 3 times or something. If you just a pound over, that'll be 3 times as much. And just
to be clear, like a media pass. Where do you get a media pass? I can tell you this now because I don't do this anymore.
You print it on your printer.
I paid $1,100 for like one of those pass printers. It's not a laminator. I bought it. It like prints
Polaroid,
a real pass. No, it like prints a hard pass that you see in a company, specifically just to make media passes. And so then we make them look official. Like have our logo. We gave it a serial number that we made up. Have a picture of you. Have a name. And big at the bottom it says media pass. And we just gave that was like you got issued a Rush 24 bag and a media pass. Like here's your media pass to go out. You get 2 of them. Make sure you don't lose them and then if you show up with consumer bags and try to use the media pass, you'll cause all kinds of trouble. And we would tell people don't ever use it for your consumer stuff. But if you show up with a bunch of Pelican cases and a media pass, they're going to give you a media pass rate. And that's going to be Southwest has one. Virgin's is kind of messed up. Whatever U.S. Airways now is a disaster. They want you to call ahead of time and all this other stuff. But United, that's why we all flew United, is because United was the easiest one to do media pass, and that's why they do media pass, is because we required everybody to fly United. Under no circumstances would we pay. Like if a freelancer said, "Oh, I want to go on Delta or something," unless they were Nate Hill. We would say no. Like you're going to fly United because everything has to be on that process.
One other consideration too is if you've got a bunch of people, let's say you got 4 people flying and you're spreading out your cases amongst the 4 people, and so each person's taking 3 or 4 cases to not going over the limit for one person. If one of you is delayed and doesn't get on the plane, they may have to pull all of the equipment off the plane because they will not allow any luggage to fly unless the person that checked that luggage is on the plane.
On the other side of that, the only way I got to Brazil one time was because they'd already put my bags in but said I didn't have a ticket. And I told the Copa Airlines or whatever, I was like, if I don't get on that flight, I'm going to walk over to that security officer and tell him that there's bags on the plane without the passengers. And I was like, and then that'll be the end of this flight because it's a really big flight. They found my ticket. Next question.
Ronnie Hofsoy from Tromsø, Norway, asking, we need additional Thunderbolt and USB-C ports for our MacMini M1. What are the latest and most efficient gadgets available that can expand these ports and also include an HDMI output without unnecessary extras typically found in docks?
Good, Chris.
Minus the and also portion of your response. I actually just bought 2 of these, one by accident, so I'm about to return this one. This is the 11, I believe they call it the 11-port Thunderbolt dock from OWC. It doesn't actually have the HDMI, but what I ended up doing on my setup, so here's the MacBook Pro, here's the dock. It has 3 Cs, 3 As, RJ11, and power. This will also actually power the computer through there. You don't have to use the MagSafe. I got another little thing to plug the HDMI. Now, on a MacBook Pro, there is an HDMI, and the only reason I didn't actually plug my HDMI into that, as silly as it may sound, is it reaches out into a walkway and it would get knocked. So I opted to put another little thing in there.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
The one I like a lot is this little guy here. I'll show you. They'll have my M1. It fits very well. Satechi makes it. It does not have an HDMI output on it, but you can easily, as you can see, plug a adapter into one of the many USB ports on it. But it also provides storage, and it's got an SD card slot on it, and it's the same footprint as the M1, so it's kind of nice. I also have a Thunderbolt dock like Chris has there that works wonders. I like anything that OWC makes. It's just superb.
There you go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I have the OWC dock as well, but I also have the pluggable dual video dock. Keep in mind, if you're going to plug in more than 2 monitors, you're going to have to find a way to basically bring in DisplayPort to run so you can use any other 3rd, 4th, 5th monitor from there, and that's where the pluggable comes in.
Yeah, I think that, and Chris, is the OWC one, is that the one that fits underneath like the Satechi one? Or is it?
Nah,
because OWC makes that as well.
Thing.
And I will say, so Yeah, OWC makes one that sits underneath your Mac Mini as well that does a lot of with Hitachi. I have to admit, I got 2 Hitachis and I had them for a while, and one of them just kept on restarting. Like it kept on my drive appeared and disappeared long enough that I just took them out of the system. But the OWC one I think is probably the build quality might be a little bit better.
I think my only complaint about these, and it's probably because of the circuit board, is it definitely has a front and a back, and you plug all the outputs in the back, but you plug the inputs into the front, and I
don't like the layout of that, but
it's awkward on a desk.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Please, OWC, can we do that? I guess that's because of the way the circuit board's laid out. I don't know.
Maybe they think that's the way you want it. Next question.
Next question from Robert Sababity in Poland. Shout out to Chris Fenwick's spontaneous lab yesterday on ScreenFlow. Great presentation. Big turnout. Lots of questions. Thank you, Chris.
Let's do it again, Chris.
I have a few things I'd like to say about that. First of all, Robert, I object. This is not a question. Please, let's use Makana for questions. Secondly, and it's simple, Robert, just put a little question mark at the end. Nobody looks at sentence structure. Second, it was great. It was really fun. It was very impromptu. Liberty contacted me during the show, and I didn't read the message till after the show, saying, "Good grief, you've ruined my day. I'm now going to be watching tutorials." I said, "Hey, let's hop on Zoom. I'll show you some stuff." And she said, "Could we do it in after hours?" I go, "Yeah, sure." And I want to throw out a personal apology. Elle, I did not realize you had a lab that was going on. I apologize. I didn't mean to step on it. It was just me being a poor at planning. But yes, we should do it again. It would be easy to do again, and I would gladly do it again. And yeah, it was awesome. It was really good. That guy's good.
We're working on these workshops, and these will be, their own little thing. And I think this might be a good first one. So you and I will talk about that. But we will stream it, take questions, so on and so forth. People can watch it, and it'll be recorded so that other people can watch it there. So I think that might be useful.
Apparently, there will be no questions from Robert because question mark.
He didn't ask a question. He just made a statement. Thanks, Robert.
Comments for questions.
Next question.
Next question. Can't we all just get along, by the way? This one's from Chester Sweeney. It's a QR code. Chester's from Las Vegas. What's some good waterproof cameras that are perfect for bottom of the full pool shots or video?
Go ahead, Mitchell, real quick.
GoPro.
Yeah, GoPro. A lot of the action cameras can do that. The GoPros, they now have, I think they don't need the little case. We used to always have little cases for them, but you can just go underwater with them now and then throw them in there. So that's definitely a good option as far as the pool because it doesn't go that deep. Remember that a lot of your phones now can do that, and you can get cases for most of your cameras to do that. I have fallen into my pool while cleaning it while on the phone, and I will tell you that I was literally in the middle of a sentence, and then I was just like, whoop, and then they got to hear me underwater, and it was pretty funny. Anyway, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, a lot of action cameras are waterproof these days. The problem you're going to run into if you want to run live video out is getting a cable to plug into it and work underwater, because that probably is not going to work.
Yeah, I have some underwater rigs, and those have HDMI cables actually, but they have this sealing screw that is going to seal it into the rig to make that actually work. So that is an issue if you're trying to get live out. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Please, for the love of God, tell me you have a Ring camera with video of you falling into the pool. Because if you have it, I will donate $1,000 to the /donate page on Office Hours Global right now for that video.
I don't have the video. Anyway, I don't have even
missed opportunities, Lindsay.
Yep, exactly. Next question.
Brody Brazil in Danville, California, looking for a way to track network data rates up and down usage speeds on a Mac, preferably something that fits on the menu bar. Anything like this exists?
iStat menu. iStat menu. It is the best. It's like $8 or something, or $14. I don't know. Maybe they bumped the price up, but I put it on all my machines. And I just look up, like, what's going on up there? Like, what is my speed? It's CPU. It's my it's my CPU, my memory, my hard drive, my speed. Fans. All that stuff is up there. So, and you can decide what you want to show and what you don't want to show. iStat menu. Next question.
Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. Is there a noticeable difference between APS-C and micro Four Thirds sensor size?
Yes. The Micro Four Thirds is going to be, the answer is yes. There is a noticeable difference. The Micro Four Thirds is going to have a greater depth of field. It's also going to have better, not as good low light sensitivity. So those are the two things that you usually pay for with Micro Four Thirds. We're going to be talking about trends here in just a minute or less than a minute. And just a quick reminder, of course, is that the weekend we have general Q&A on Saturday and introspection on Sunday. Sunday is really if you have questions about office hours itself, how we're doing things, comments, concerns, questions, all those things we usually do on Sunday. And also a quick reminder that our new panelist meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m. It's Saturday at 9 a.m. So if you're interested in being a panelist, you just want to find out about it, join us on Saturday, 9 o'clock, roughly after the show, and we will walk you through the paces, answer your questions, and see if it's something that you might like to do. Welcome back to the second hour, and we're going to be talking a little bit about trends that we see, in IT, infrastructure, the process of building shows and events, the process of building content. So not necessarily vertical to specifically audio or video, which we already talked about today, but really looking at all of the other things that are out there. So if you've got ideas of what that might be, for the panelists, raise your hand. For the producers, go ahead and throw those questions in or those comments into either Mukana. You can go ahead and type those in and vote those up and down, but you can also put them into, go to askofficehours.global. You can see a little QR code here, askofficehours.global, and throw those comments in, and we'll check those and bring those in as well. I think it's going to be interesting. I think that, for a lot of these structures, I think one of the things I'm noticing is that something that I think is going to affect us over time is more and more bandwidth to the home. I think when we think about REMI, when we think about remote, I just got I finally, after a year of Frontier telling me that they were going to bring fiber to my house, I finally got yes, we're actually going to bring fiber to your house. And I think that that is something that where I live is pretty low density, and so it's been really hard to, I called another ISP. I actually knew the owner of another ISP, and I said, when are you going to bring fiber to our house? And he's like, $360,000. That's what it will cost to do that. That's the cost of bringing that fiber there. But they were, but they're slowly working that out. I think that most of us will have fiber in our houses before 5G actually works. And so I think that that's a challenge for 5G actually, because when 5G was thought up, the bandwidth to houses was very low. And as 5G is rolling out slowly and starts and stops, fiber just keeps on chugging along, and I think that that's really important. And I think that, I think the promise of Starlink is that it can work, but I still, at my house, I can't find a place that doesn't lose 20 seconds every 45 minutes. Like it just turns off. And that's fine for someone surfing, I guess, but it's not something that I can consider a work connection. So anyway, so I think that, and even then, 60 megs up and down is cute. But, for fiber now, I think what I'm going to get is $150 for 2 gigs up and down. So the, and I think that changes a lot of things. The reason I mention that as a trend is not only just for production, but for distribution, of being able to send content out to people. Right now, when you watch a lot of the shows that you watch, they are very limited by the bandwidth that they assume you can get. Now, they're also limited by the cost it takes to deliver the footage to you. I think that one of the things that you may see as a trend is that sending you content in real time very fast is expensive. Sending it over a long period of time is kind of like a dark times, and just slowly feeding it to you is not expensive. Why is that important? It's because the quality of our shows, especially as you get into these 85-inch screen TVs that are 8K or other things, the quality of the shows is being affected by how much it costs to get you the content, for each one of these things. And that, I think you're going to see your movies getting trickled to you over time. So you say, oh, I want to watch this at a certain time, and they're gonna send it to you over a week. Like there's a premiere day that this is when the highest quality version or whatever that you have, you can schedule it, and everyone's going to watch it at the same time. It's kind of like, it'll seem odd to people that haven't seen that for a long time. But the idea is to slowly send it to everyone and then hit the network, or not have to hit the network, just have it. It's basically cached. And a lot of our viewing tools, our Apple TVs, our Rokus, have drives in them. Like they can download that and cache it to the system. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see, how that kind of affects things. I also think that when we talk about, infrastructure, and production, I'm really interested. I was talking to a creator that was actually using a Meta Quest for their production on a plane. So they said, "Oh, well, I have 3 monitors," and I'm like, you're actually using 3 monitors in VR space, to edit? And they're like, yeah, I'm running Premiere, in 3 monitors. And they said, I can sit on a plane and sit there and work away. And I have 3, basically 3 virtual monitors in front of me. I think that this is going to be a really interesting.
Like a headset thing?
Yeah, with a Meta Quest. They have a Meta Quest with it's not even the, and I think that I know a lot of people poo-poo Apple's Vision Pro, but the idea that you could be sitting in a small office and suddenly have a bunch of monitors in front of you, and if it's high enough resolution, and Apple's definitely shown pieces of that should be viewable in that area. I think that from a production perspective, it's a pretty interesting puzzle, to see what what happens in that kind of virtual world, and can people actually put those headsets on and leave them on? I mean, I haven't had trouble. I mean, I've had headsets on for 5 or 6 hours, so I'm not one of the people that is bothered by headsets.
So a half day.
Half day, mostly watching movies. So that's on a flight watching movies. Or I got COVID. The last time I had COVID, I'm up in my room and I can't go anywhere, and so I was just up there and laying on the bed watching movies. On a little on the XR, the XD. So anyway, so I think that's I think that those kinds of things are going to be really interesting. I do think that as we think about production, that's going to be important. I also think that we'll continue to see more and more of these tools become, more and more democratized. So how do you get production out to lots of people? I think that the phones now have gotten to the point where they're capable of delivering content. What's not really out there yet is the ability to aggregate that content effectively for like news events. There's and I think that's going to be a really interesting puzzle that someone has to fix or figure out, is I've got a news event, I've got a whole bunch of people with iPhone 15s. How do I get that footage right now? And all of those tools are, very, very close to being, the tools are all there, all the capabilities there, and just no one has tied that together, so I think that's going to be an interesting trend as we see it, going through there. I do think that overall with infrastructure trends is that you're also going to see, I'm talking to there's a couple things. One is we're moving a lot of our kits to phones, so we're designing the kits around, I know you have a phone. So I'm going to give you a mic and a light and a thing and a thing and a thing, but I'm not trying to figure out how to get onto your computer. I'm just trying to get onto your phone, and how to tie into your phone. And the big thing right now is that we have to go, well, do you have Lightning? But for a lot of the creators that we work with, they all have USB-C. They all have, generally all the creators we've run into have iPhone 15s. They bought them when they came out. For creators, they stay pretty current on the iPhone because it has the new tools that they need for what they're doing. And so we just have to figure out how do we build a nice rig. I think you're going to see, one of the things the main reason I wanted to go to CES, I may still go for a day, but the main reason I wanted to go to CES was just to see what the iPhone, if they show a lot of iPhone rigs. I don't think that's going to really happen until NAB, but you may see some of them at CES. But NAB, you're going to see booth after booth after booth of customization for the iPhones, whether it's lensing, whether it's kit. The USB-C has really changed a lot in that realm, and you're going to see a huge explosion. And part of it is, and people wonder why is it iPhone, not Android? Part of it's because it's only one form factor. So I was talking to someone that makes batteries, and they make a lot of stuff, and they make but the iPhone's the biggest one. He said because all the iPhones are the same size. Problem with Android is that all the phones are different. they're not, it's hard to build for one phone because there's so many different phones. Whereas an iPhone is an iPhone. Like if you have an iPhone 15, it's just that model. They don't. Each year you only have to have one build, and so a lot of them can put more energy into that. Usually, what you get is iPhone, or you get universal. Like that's kind of what they end up building there, because so many people have so many different phones on the other side. And so I think you're going to see a lot more customization for mobile rigs. I'm really interested to see where the Blackmagic cloud goes, in that type of thing of being able to do production and having those clips show up. We're going to start experimenting with that as early as next week. I want to see, we're going to set up a Blackmagic cloud system so that we can start to see if I can shoot stuff with my phone and have it show up on somebody's, on somebody's in Resolve for them. That's a really interesting puzzle to see how that works. So anyway, those are some of the trends I'm looking at. If you've got ideas about what trends you're looking at, go ahead and throw those into Makana or go into askofficehours.global. Let's go ahead into the first idea.
Ryan Gordon from New York City says, when live streaming events at hotels or conventions, is it more common to bring your own router or just a switch to connect to their handoff? I prefer having maximum control over the network. However, using a router could lead to double NAT issues.
Generally, I don't know if this is really a trend or not, but just to answer the question, generally we bring our own router. So we ask, the only time we really have trouble, ironically, is when we have two Meraki routers. So if the location has a Meraki router and ours is a Meraki router, that tends to take a little bit of talking through. But we bring our own router because we deliver we do DHCP across all of our kits and deliver we hand off all of the, from our router, we hand off all the IPs to the individual pieces of hardware. So we can't really, we need a router in between. In most grown-up facilities, that's not really an issue. Like they're used to just delivering and now what I will say is going to a facility, we usually have conversations with their IT department 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time, and then a couple days ahead of time, and we're making requests for ports, we're telling them what we have, what you don't want to do is show up on the day of the event and start making requests. Like I'm not saying we never do that, but it's very rare. Generally, there's lots of conversations, and we figure out who our point of contact is. They know what we need. We've set it in email. We've outlined it. We've put lots of white space around our requests, so they really see this is what we need. We're clear. We don't ask for more than what we need, but we definitely ask for what we need, and that makes a big difference in getting what you want. It's so important when you're dealing with a facility to get way ahead of it and figure it out. Next question.
Robert Sababity in Poland. What will be the main storage type for sharing files for video editing other than Blackmagic's cloud store?
Good, Chris.
I have a specific question about about this. Do we have any data on the longevity of SSD RAIDs and SSD drives?
It's not, it does. I don't know what the exact one. I watched a David Pogue thing about that, and it is like limited. And it's not time, it's how many times it's being written and rewritten will affect the length of the SSDs. And we found, a lot of times for us, for Pixel Core, we would write a date on when we first used that disk. We'd write a date on it, and then I oftentimes put little marks on it when we used it again. And usually we only used an SSD for 2 or 3 shows, and then it would go into storage. I mean, we would use it on our own for that, but we would buy new storage. And usually we tried to buy new storage for every, fresh, like you'd buy a SR deck, you'd buy tapes. We just think of them as tapes, and we would just buy them for the show and budget it for the show. They were about the same price, so we just buy them for the shows. And then we ended up with, at one point, I think I had almost 1,000 SSDs because they were just, I still have them floating around here that are like 500s and 250s and 1 terabytes and 2 terabytes because we just didn't use them over and over and over again because I was afraid of exactly what you're asking about. I didn't want to ever have to explain why I have a beat up old US SSD to a big client, and so everything was all fresh. And it also meant that we could just hand them those, to do this. But we used the internal ones, the old ones, constantly.
Yeah. So Robert's question is specifically about editing, and I got to say, Robert, if I could afford, rather, I know I could have it. If I could afford like a 50 terabyte SSD RAID, I would absolutely do it. There's a real performance boost by using SSDs versus spinners. I just can't. So my primary editing drive is a 64 terabyte OWC something 8. It has the word 8 and it has 8 drives in it. But I think trends, there will be a tipping point where everybody's just like, oh no, I would never use spinners. Now, some people like to say that, and maybe they do, but I'm just dealing with way too much data. It would, and not knowing what it would cost. And so there's the day-to-day, I'm pounding on this data, hours and hours versus the archived and put away. We had a short discussion in November about why don't we just do everything on archive on SSD? I said, well, one, I don't know how long it'll last, and it's still way more expensive. So we still archive on spinners. It's cheap. It's super cheap.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the price is coming down. I think the trend is going to be right now for NVMe. You can look, here's a NVMe RAID for 4-slot NVMEs, 40 gigabit I/O with Thunderbolt 4 for $315. So you
How
can
big?
stick 4 slots. So it depends on the size of the NVMEs that you put in there. I guess you can get 5 terabytes each. And it does
8.
all flavors. 8? You can get 8? Okay, right.
Yeah,
and the price keeps coming down. In fact, the higher the resolution, the price on the higher density flash is coming down considerably. And I have flash, thumb drives from 15, 20 years ago still boot up and read fine on a USB 2. So you can imagine, I think the flash RAM is up to it, especially with the wear leveling routines that are built into all the flash now. So it doesn't reuse, it controls how many times each cell is written to and moves that data around, spreads it out amongst all the drives. If they're striped, I'm not sure how it handles that. I think it handles it internally in the electronics of the flash itself. So the computer thinks it's a certain sector and it's really internally moving it around and mapping it to different sectors. So I wouldn't worry too much about wearing it out, in other words.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's interesting conversation. I have not blown up an SSD, and I generally have a single SSD as my main external editing drive for Premiere. And ironically, I've got a Go drive with a RAID mirrored spinnies as the backup. And I'm curious about the SSDs, and are they more likely to burn out or wear out if they're bigger or smaller?
No, it's just how many times they use the same sectors, and so or the same whatever they call them there. So but they're not sectors.
Cells.
Sectors is a hard drive.
Yeah.
Cells. I have had ones wear out. Like we have used them over and over and over again, recording, like every day. We're using them all the time, and they stop working. And so it is something that if you're writing to them all the time, and again, this is a very daily, using them all the time, that we have had them run out, not like become less efficient. So they've become less efficient. They've stopped mounting. They've stopped doing. There's lots of things that happen to them. Another thing is that like for those of us who use hyperdecks, and you pop the big hyperdecks and you push them in. One thing to remember is that the SSDs are generally rated for 150 insertions, which to them, if you were putting them in a hard drive, seems an insane number to test an SSD 150 times. But if you're using them as cassettes, it's not that long. So they're not built to be pulled in and pushed out over and over and over again. For what we do. So like if you think about, I pushed it in to record, I pulled it out, I pushed it into back to pull the data off. That's two. So there's and then I push it back in to get ready for the next one. 3. And we've done it more than 150, but you do have to pay attention to those things. Go ahead, Chris.
So, Mitch, you said you use a single SSD as your primary. You're not talking about an SSD RAID, just a single drive that you edit on all day long?
Affirmative.
Huh.
Yeah, you get more speed. I mean, again, for me, I'm using the little M2s that Chris got me hooked on. These are the OWC NVMe RAIDs. And these are one little box with 4 NVMEs. And mine's like 8 terabytes because for some reason, most of my projects are like 6 terabytes. I don't know why, but they all live in this like 6 to 8 terabyte range. And they work well.
Chris, I use the OWC Envoys. And they work fine just by themselves. No RAID, no nothing, just fast.
It just depends on what you're, again, for me, if I'm doing 4K HDR with a lot of footage and a lot of things, I will say that like with 6K footage from like 6 sources of 6K footage, I actually can't even use the NVMe RAID because the transport into my Mac Studio isn't fast enough. I have to put it on the Mac Studio internal hard drive to get that to work because I need 4 gigs a second to actually edit it. Next question.
Next question from Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina. As we rely more and more on IP networks for production, network troubleshooting is a vital skill. Could we explore tools like Wireshark more in 2024? Maybe bring on someone like Chris Greer from YouTube on for a primer.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that, understanding how Wireshark works, understanding how IP, we're going to definitely spend more focused time on, really understanding IP networks as we go through 2024. So Wireshark is a great one, and we'll see if we can get Chris Greer. That'd be great. Someone put that into the second hour. That's kind of like where notes get held. So while I'm on the show. Next question.
Alexander Knight, Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. Are we going to see environmental push to go green in data centers? We hear Apple talking about this a lot, but silence from data center companies.
A lot of the companies that are building some of the biggest data centers are Apple and Google and Facebook and so on and so forth, and they all are trying to. I mean, Google I think builds theirs next to dams, because it has less to do with anything other than just efficiency. It's more efficient to have the power right next to the data center. They're pulling up so much power that they need to be right next to the source, and they don't want to necessarily be right next to a coal plant or so I think a lot of them are either building the solar right onto the data center or right next to it, or they're building it next to dams for hydroelectric. So a lot of that stuff is already happening, and it's not really happening from a green perspective. It's happening from an efficiency perspective. That it makes more sense for them to do that. In general, I would say whether it's events or production or other things like that, you're going to see a harder and harder push towards carbon footprint. Like carbon footprint is just going to keep on becoming a conversation of what people are doing, and people are going to have to be. I think when we talk about events, which we talk about on Fridays sometimes, we have heard this floating around for now 3 or 4 years, but it's starting to come up where people are saying, we want people to publish the carbon footprint for their event. Like you had X number of people coming from these different, because you can actually get a pretty accurate view. If you have a bunch of people coming and they're registering and they're from New York, calculate the flight, automatically calculate the flight from New York to LA. Will it be perfect? Will everyone do the same thing? No, but they want that calculation published, and they're going to ask people they're going to push companies like Salesforce, who are having 110,000 people show up in San Francisco, to publish it and to buy carbon credits to pay it off. Like they're going to want them to do that. And that's going to put a downward pressure on doing physical events because it's not going to be something you want to talk about. And it's been kind of invisible for folks, but it's not going to be invisible for much longer. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the green consideration is very interesting because we're trying to build a data center because of the number of lawyers here and major corporations that are based here. So green is one thing. The other thing is intellectual property, and we're hoping that we can build some kind of legislation into our local economy that allows data centers to be built green and also intellectual property.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think Google's claims they've been doing carbon offsets, in other words, buying carbon credits for the amount of current that they use to reduce their carbon footprint. But I think a lot of these companies, although they do consume huge, as Alex said, huge amounts of power, putting them next to geothermal or solar arrays will help.
Yeah, and again, the one that's been the easiest one to build around is the hydroelectric dams. So there's a bunch of them that are very, very near there. And again, they're pulling so much power into these data centers that that just the transport over the cables is a problem. Like I think we don't think about what it costs for us to what it costs for us to have the interface the infrastructure that we have here, when we jump on the internet, it's just kind of like it's pixels, but it is an enormous amount of power that's required to support the internet as we know it. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
You can veto this question if you want, but do you have any idea where the money goes for buying a carbon credit? What happens to that money? Where does it go? How does it help the planet?
It's a whole nother show. A show that we're not going to have here. So anyway, okay. Yeah. So, so it's I think it's mostly a penalty for doing it. So I think
can we put that on an episode of The Third Rail?
Yeah. We can put that on the episode. We should create a podcast just called Third Rail. We're going to talk about all the things we can't talk about in office hours. We're not going to do that.
You're kidding, right? We've been talking. We've been talking about this for 3 years.
We're not going to talk about the Third Rail. Next question.
Robert Sababity in Poland asked, in 2022-23, we saw most new conference rooms and hotels using PA systems with audio in via HDMI or their wireless microphones. Any signs of change to provide XLR inputs into hotel conference rooms' PA systems?
So I will say that in general, I ignore the hotel infrastructure except for the internet and power. So I don't really, we just go in and immediately say, we're not going to use any of this, and then usually when the client says, well, we have, that's going to cost more and, yada, yada, yada. We just make the list of all the things that are going to go wrong. And they'll do the event once, and all the things that we told them would go wrong will go wrong. and then they let us bring our own speakers in. And a lot of it has to do with exactly what you're talking about, which is that the infrastructure inside of inside of many of these facilities are created by integrators who think that this is more efficient and it's cheaper and everything else, but it's not done by people who actually do production, who actually have to use those rooms. And it makes it so that it makes it much more sense. Now, sometimes I think that also a lot of the hotels we work with have that as the built-in infrastructure, but they do have a service in the United States, mostly PSAV, that can come in and put all kinds of other things in there for an extra cost. So it's kind of like if you're just going to use the hotel room and you're not going to pay us extra for it, well, here you go. If you are going to use, there's a minimum viable product there, an MVP, that is there to help you. If you want to pay more, you can get it. I don't know what it's like in Europe, but in the United States, that's how there's an MVP for the room that you can kind of turn on. It's super easy. It doesn't have a lot of wires, and it just works. It's not great, but it just does the thing. And then you can either pay the hotel or bring in a company. Sometimes you can only pay the hotel, and bring in your own stuff to customize it. So most of the shows I work on, we customize it. But if you're just walking into a conference room, you may be stuck with what they have there. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, a lot of hotels have gone to this HD-based-T distribution system that uses packetized Ethernet, although not TCP, to connect their remote inputs. And so they just use HDMI. Running XLR inputs over long lengths of cable, especially in hotel rooms, which use a lot of SCR dimmers in them, is not a good idea. And I think they've pretty much abandoned it because of interferent, hum issues and trying to keep a clean signal. It has become problematic, especially if they're running it through the walls, et cetera. So I think that's why you're going to see most of these with little boxes or ports in the wall that accept HDMI in, and maybe a couple of analog inputs that are immediately converted to HDCP. Not HDCP, HD-based-T or some other type of digital protocol that goes back to a rack somewhere in the back of the room.
One of the things that I got into a conversation with, I've actually somehow gotten into the conversation. I've said it on air somewhere because I get pinged every once in a while about it. And so I've been in a couple conversations related to this, which is hotel chains or specific hotels thinking about building basically connectivity hotel rooms. So, because what happened was I was complaining about something, and my big complaint was, hey, I would pay an extra $20 a night if you gave me a room that didn't have my bed in the background, that didn't have a weird painting in my background, that had good, wired, an Ethernet connection, that had somewhere I could put lights and so on, like just attach it, not the lights itself, but just have attachments for it. That as when you think about all these creators, when you think about road warriors, when you think about all these folks that are in these meetings, paying a little bit extra, a lot of them, especially road warriors, would pay an extra $25 to know that, per night, to know that they could just connect and it's going to work. Like it's going to have the right connection. They're going to look good for their next meeting. And it's not some weird hotel room look, it looks nice behind them. And it's just organizing the room a little bit. So for instance, there's certain rooms inside of the Lowe's Hotel in Hollywood that I ask for. I don't always get them, but I ask for because I know that I have a clean area behind me and it's a relatively good connection. And there's the way the room has been organized is the ones that work, and it's right. Turns out it's right next to the elevator too, which is great. And far enough away that I don't hear it, but close enough that it's easy to get in and out. So I always ask for those rooms, and so sometimes they give them to me. I go there often enough that I'm now a regular person. So if I ask for it and it's available, they're going to give it to me. And so but it makes a big difference. And so I started talking to someone. I was like, and then, you could do all kinds of things with this because when we talk about digital first events, if you're doing an event down in the conference center or area, you could have people, joining the event from these, like if you build a digital first where everyone's just in different screens, you could be using these hotel rooms for that. People could be streaming out of them. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity there and people will pay more. The big thing that got everybody's attention was people will pay more for those rooms, and you can list those rooms as a little bit more and you could end up with people who are, paying to be in those rooms. Go ahead, Chris.
I think this clearly falls under the category of lunatic fringe. I think the number of people that are thinking the way you are is a very, 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 very small sliver of users of the hotels. That's my guess.
Maybe, but I'm not talking just about creators. I'm talking about road warriors who don't like to look dorky. These are salespeople. These are presenters. There are, like I have to present from hotel rooms occasionally, and I literally choose my hotel rooms by the bandwidth and the connectivity I have at those.
You do. I understand.
But I'm not the only one. There's a bunch of us that talk about it, and we're like, because we trade notes of like, this one has good connectivity, this one doesn't. That's how I find out where the hotel rooms are, is that we're sitting there talking about which ones we can actually connect from. The bottom line is that the wireless in the hotels, you can't really connect for a meeting or a conference from a hotel room right now because most of them are just a disaster. And so you always know that this is, that you don't have any, and it's just and again, hotel rooms are trying to, hotel rooms are trying to figure out how they do something different. It's not a matter of they have to do this huge rewiring of every room in the hotel. It's, a spine of a room every floor that has this thing. You just do them all up one line so that you can do all the connectivity in one straight line. And it's not, and they do all kinds of customization like that for that edge case because those people become pretty religious about going to that hotel like I do. Like I know that I got good connectivity in certain hotels in LA and those are the ones I go to. And when I talk to other folks I've been talking to folks on planes and stuff like that, everybody pays attention to it. Just the hotels aren't paying attention to it,
The other thing I'll say is I'm also the guy who said that digital photography would never be a thing. So I could be wrong.
Exactly. Next question.
Laura Thompson from Beaumont, Texas. 23andMe, LastPass, and other breaches. How do we secure our infrastructure? To your point of using the phone as a remote kit, I would be reluctant to give someone access to my phone as it can follow me.
Well, we're not looking at giving a couple things there. If we send out a phone, it'll be a generalized phone that doesn't belong to anyone. If we use somebody else's phone, we're not trying to control their phone at all. Like we're just giving them the things that they need to plug in and tell them where to go. Good, Courtney?
Well, I don't know about using it as a remote kit. I was just going to say that for security purposes, moving to biometrics is the big trend now, and fingerprint readers are going to be on everything, I think. Facial recognition has its problems. It gets a lot of errors. So I think everything's going to have a fingerprint. Sensors have gotten a lot cheaper and easy to incorporate. They can now put them on every phone's underneath the screen, so they don't take up any real estate on the case. So I think movement to that and use is going to become much more universal for encryption and security.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'd like to point out that Neo's life was fine until he received that phone as a package in his cubicle at the office. Like he was perfectly happy. I'm just gonna say.
I don't know if he was perfectly happy, but
it's a little weird to send somebody a tracking device. Here you go.
Next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada. As production is able to be managed remotely due to infrastructure, what do we expect to see regarding competition in local markets?
You know, I keep on thinking that more people will do this, more municipalities, but we don't see a lot of movement in it, in the sense that, you know, really getting good connectivity and making sure that there's good connectivity in a local market is a great way for a lot of rural areas or smaller towns and everything else to be competitive. You know, and I think that in a lot of cases they've allowed large stakeholders like AT&T and others to basically run the show because they were lazy, because they got a lot of, you know, contributions to their next campaign. But they've all been, you know, they all kind of got caught, you know, during COVID. And I think that, you know, I think there's a huge opportunity for smaller markets to provide inexpensive solutions to live and work remotely. And you're going to see that competition slowly wake up, you know, of like, oh, you know, if I'm Freeport, like I think about Freeport, Pennsylvania a lot, which actually has really good connectivity, in case you're wondering. There is an interesting mix of how do you provide the services that are needed for that, for people coming in, you know, and what I mean by services is like a nightlife, you know, and maybe it's not a nightlife, but just a variety of places to go to eat and things to do and, you know, all those other things that you have to kind of figure out. But I think that, I mean, I just know so many people that are moving out of California right now. Like, I just like they're all like going to other places, and they're all, and what they look for first is bandwidth. Like, it just, you know, it is like, can I get a 1 gig up and down connection? And more importantly, for many of them, can I get 2? You know, if I can get 2 different service providers for my house, and nowadays these fiber connections are costing $150 each. So if I can pay $300 for my house, that may seem like a lot of money, but if you're moving from California to somewhere else, the cost of living is so much lower that the cost of having a couple really good connections so you can work remotely is going to change. And so I think that you're going to continue to see this diffusion into smaller markets as remote work continues to increase. Remote production, but remote work in general plays to the smaller markets and against the bigger markets, because the bigger markets are really expensive, and so you're going to keep on seeing that movement. And it's not really politics; it's really just money. You know, it's just a lot less expensive to live somewhere other than some of these states. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, that's very interesting that people are moving based on the bandwidth available. And I'm wondering if that's everybody or just people in our line of work. And the other question I have that's related to this is that, do you think that my apartment, which is totally wired for Ethernet and media, adds value to my unit to the average person? That's my question.
Not really. It's mostly like, can I get better than 25 up? You know, like that's the big thing that a lot of people are trying to figure out, because there's a lot of places in the United States you can't. You know, like there's a lot of places where it's, you know, it can be whatever down, but it's going to be like 25 up, and that's all that's available. And, you know, for some people that's enough, but, you know, there's a lot of places that only have 10 up. You can't get faster than 10 up in some places in the United States. You can't have a family, you know, both people working at 10 up, you know, and be on Zoom. Like, that's the problem. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and I think, Mitch, with the importance of having wired Ethernet in every room is becoming less and less with, Wi-Fi 6, higher speed Wi-Fi protocols, and the ability of routers to cover at least an apartment size area easily at high speed is now made that less of a requirement. I know we like to have wired Ethernet everywhere for reliability purposes, but I tell you, the wireless Wi-Fi 6, the higher speed Ethernet, the higher speed Wi-Fi speeds are fine for most people.
Right?
Yeah, one of the downsides is that when you live in a condo, you've got a lot of people in close proximity using wireless, and it does cause problems.
Yeah. I think that very fast fiber is what you need. Like 1 gig connection fiber with Ethernet is what you need to be a remote production person. You can have a lot of other things you can do if you're working in finance or whatever. You can be whatever you want. But I'm saying that if you want to be someone who's going to be that can build a business around working from home in a REMI kind of situation, you need to be able to figure out, can this house have 2 1 gig connections, and can it, and can I figure out backup power and so on and so forth for those? Because otherwise, the first time you're not available, we're not going to call you again. And that's the issue is that'll be it. And so it does, there are infrastructural requirements to working from home. But I do think that, but I also think that there's big opportunities. I'm continuing this conversation, for instance, in Freeport, about turning a room into a remote production space in Freeport. This big space that's there. When I say a room, it's pretty big, 2,000 square feet, into a production space there, because I think that it could be doing lots of production out of there, either in the cloud or locally or a bit of both. And I think as we move more and more production to the cloud, you're going to see us do a lot more cloud work over this next year. That can be done anywhere, but you still need a good fast connection to get to it, to be able to interact with it. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I have business class Comcast, and I'd love to have fiber, but here's the thing. Verizon came in and surveyed the place and said, we'll install fiber in every one of your units. And I went to the board and I said, this is brilliant because now we're going to have 2 ISPs fighting it out, and obviously the fiber is better. And the appropriate management decided, we don't like it because we don't like the kind of wire mold that they use to run the fiber down the hallway. So
Pitchforks.
No 1 gigabyte here.
Pitchforks. That's the answer to that.
Torches.
So no. You don't go to the board. You build everyone in. You tell everyone what the difference would be for them in the space, and then you get them to show up at the board meeting, all of them, with torches and pitchforks. Like, that's how you fix this. Boards can be very flippant until they have half of the people screaming at them, and then then that solves that problem. It takes time. It's not something that you do over time. I mean, but the easiest way to move people in boards is angry people. And what you do is you build that very slowly, and then you can focus that energy, into things that happen. But that's how you move things in the United States. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Mitchell, we have the exact same problem at the apartment that we have in Emeryville. It's a huge complex. It's something like I think it's like 1,200 units. It's a really big and Comcast Xfinity, which we all hate, but they were so tired of all the complaints that they were getting. A lot of them were coming from me, that they budgeted and set aside $10 million to retrofit all the buildings. And the same thing, the board shut it down. It's like, no, we don't want that. Same thing. We don't want to see the thing. Ironically, the next year, the fire department came through and said, oh, no, you're not going to have that little conduit, with a little bit of fiber in it, but you do have to have a new giant sprinkler pipes. So all the hallways were tainted. Anyway, I also wanted to point out, I've been shopping for other places to live a lot, and Zillow, quite often, if you add fiber in your keyword, it's going to show you, and pre-wired for fiber, pre-wired fiber communication, pre-wired with so-and-so Idaho fiber already installed. Those are the ones that are actually in Idaho. But Zillow knows.
It's coming up. I mean, it's becoming a remote. I think that we've talked about this before, but basically things go forward and then they go back and then they go forward like that. And so we went way forward, and during COVID we went back to, we're going to try to bring some people back into the office, and now it's going to keep going. And I think that people are going to do that more and more and more. In the end, it's less expensive for the companies once they get over their backwards thinking to have people working remotely, because a lot of them can work somewhere other than the most expensive places in the United States. and they can pay them less, and not have to support their office. And so I think that you're going to see this. It's going to be slow, but over the next decade, we're going to go from 30% of the population being working remote to probably 50%. And it's not going to be everyone. It's not going to be most anytime soon. But you're going to see this slow, evolution away from trying to get people into one location. Next question.
And it's from Guy Cochran in Seattle, USA. What CapEx versus OpEx considerations are you hearing regarding infrastructure, and why own it when you can rent, lease, borrow, or hire it out?
Good, Courtney.
This varies depending upon talk to your tax man, whether operational expenses or capital expenses. If you want to spread your investment out, if you think the business that you're getting into is going to be kind of a flash in the pan, is only going to be popular or viable for 2 or 3 years, you want to expense your stuff immediately every hour. Take Section 179 expenses for capital expenditures, or rent or lease everything so that you're not stuck with that stuff at the end of the 2 years. If you look at yourself as being in the business for a longer time, you probably want to spread out and depreciate those capital expenditures over a longer period of time. Ask your tax professional. I'm not a tax professional, and I don't play one on TV, so use caution when making this decision, because it can affect your bottom line. If you're expecting a whole lot of income up front, then capital expenditures, Section 179 can help you out quite a bit. If you want to spread it out over time, you can also do the same thing with a capital expenditure. But operating expenses, you can deduct them every year.
Yeah, I think that it depends on volume. So when I was doing a lot of volume, like a really, really high volume of work, going through, what we looked at is that I still rented all the equipment. I calculated that into every show. And typically, my shows were about 30% of the show cost was rental, gear rental. Like that was about 30% of it was just renting gear. I could rent it from somebody else, or they could rent it from me. Same price. I'm not giving you any breaks on my gear. And then about 50% of it was labor, and 20% was other logistics, pre-pro, et cetera. So 20%, 50% was labor. This is about roughly how most of my shows kind of turned out. The way I did it is that I had a budget to buy new equipment that I might need for the show. That was the entire 30%. Like I could use any of that. I couldn't go over that, but if I needed new gear, and for some events that might be, I can buy another $1,000 or $2,000. But I had a couple events a year that I could spend $200,000 was the rental. I bought an entirely new ClearComm system inside of one of those shows. I bought a production truck inside of one of those shows, or trailer. So I would do that. The reason for that is that I was never, in my eyes, I was never going below I was never losing money on that. If I had not bought it, I would have rented it from somebody. And 90% of my shows, that 30% just went back to me. It just, 90% of the shows that we had, I didn't have to spend that 30%. That was just my budget, but we would only buy what we needed for that show. And we had 3 to 5 shows a week. And so they were just churning out, and most of them were on gear that was paid off the first time it was used. Like as far as I was concerned, like it was paid off the first time it was used. And so at that point after that, it was just making money for us. And when 30% of your job is renting the gear back, it is, to put it in perspective, the revenue of 30%, in 2016, was $2.5 million of rental. So that I would have paid to somebody else if I had been a typical production company and just rented stuff. And so the thing is that, that's what you want to kind of think about it. But when when the rate goes down, when you don't have as much work and you have a lot of, then the rental of the space that holds it becomes, you start paying attention to it. It's still a small amount compared to the overall thing. But so when you have a lot of, like, having employees and having gear is really useful when you have high volume. When you have low volume, then, just renting everything. But it's just really hard to, in my opinion, as, in my current situation, we rent a lot more than we do, and to me, it's just hard to get ahead. It's also hard to innovate because when we had all that gear there, we would just sit in the office. We had a big lab area, and we just sit in the office and build stuff. Like, how are we going to do this? And we could sit there and build exactly what we wanted over weeks. We can't rent the gear over weeks. And so it allowed us to build more stable event. Like, we never showed up we'd watch, you go to Moscone, everybody else would show up and be figuring out they'd spend 4 days figuring out how to get their equipment to talk to each other, in there. We would come in with racks that had been pre-tested. I got 9 rooms. All those racks had been pre-tested. They had all been connected via everything was connected the way it was going to be connected there. It would take 45 minutes a room to set those up. And then we have everything running in the first day because everything had been pre-tested, pre-evaluated, pre-built to do the thing that it needed to do. And that was one of that's outside of the tax advantages or the rental advantages or anything else. Being able to build a more stable system, being able to innovate and continue to evolve, and having your own equipment makes the whole system way more stable. So buying rental equipment is like, it's living on the edge a lot. There's a lot of stuff that shows up that doesn't work. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, that's something that makes me super envious. Like to be in that position where you have it all, you can dial it all in, and it works. On the flip side, though, if you are going to rent, I don't own any cameras. Well, we do own cameras, but I can rent anything I need at any time, and I can do one show a year where I need an 8K red, and I don't have to buy that camera and worry that it's not earning its keep the other 50 weeks out of the year.
Well, and I will say that what allowed me to do that was Blackmagic hardware, because all my stuff was all Blackmagic hardware, which I could afford. I could never have done that with Grass Valley, or never done that with other things. It was just the switchers and everything else in the camera. It was all Blackmagic systems. So it definitely made Blackmagic allowed me to create that that business, because otherwise it wasn't feasible. And one thing we didn't buy is a lot of high-end tripods and lenses. So to your point, we would be able to customize those. I mean, I'm talking like $15,000 heads, 2575s and 2060s and so on and so forth. We had a bunch of stuff that was in the $4,000 or $5,000 range, but the big heads that we use for a lot of our main cameras, throw. Like the big long throw, the lenses that are going to follow the speaker on the stage were typically 2575s or 2060s. And those were, they're big heads. They're $15,000 just for the head, not the sticks. And I'm not going to buy those, because they cost me $75 a day to have them. So that gets into, we would make those trades all the time. What we did do is own all the core that was doing the thing. The edge we could rent all the time. The further we got closer to the edge, the more we rented, because we just didn't, we had enough that we could do the general shows, but if anything special, we wouldn't necessarily buy it for that project. Next question.
And it's from Douglas Carmichael. What would you think of a second hour on Proxmox, a Linux KVM-based open source virtualization platform?
We could look at it. We'd probably just do that as a long hour or a long answer. I don't think we could probably reach critical mass on that specific subject on any day where we could talk about it for an hour. So I think that'd probably be something we could discuss, but probably not as a whole second hour. All right. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Just kind of a throwaway. I'd like to point out at the end of this show that earlier I had the question about Discord and stuff. And I heard a couple of things that were invaluable. They were great. There were tips that I learned about how to use Discord that I had no idea about. And the end result was I donated money to the show. Thank you. I learned, and it was worth something. And I think you should do that too.
There you go. Thanks, Chris.
Sorry, I was reaching for exactly. The mute. I hit the wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so one thing that we are looking at doing is we're going to start playing around with these labs, but not labs, but workshops. These workshops may turn into something where, we have a regular cadence of things that we're putting into the second hours, but these workshops may happen where we can schedule them part of the problem with the second hour is, I mean, the advantage is there's a huge structure and it's kind of a machine and we got to do it every day and we're figuring out what we put in there. The disadvantage, of course, is that, we can only talk to so many people in this vertical at a time. What you may see us do is start to use some of these workshops to just bring people in. We don't know how long this is going to last. It's going to last until we stop talking about it. We're not trying to fit it into the overall structure of the show. We can schedule it around other people. So you're going to see Chris and I play with it a little bit. We're not going to, these workshops will probably not turn. It's more of what we're doing with Michael Krasny, which is I have another person coming in. It's sitting inside a Mimo. Eventually, it'll probably be in the cloud, where we can have these discussions back and forth. And we're still using Makana, but probably not the entire hardware infrastructure to do it. And we can have more and more of these discussions and leave them up on YouTube and so on and so forth. So I think that, stay tuned for more of those. And that's where this might make sense, where it's like kind of an interview with them, that I don't think it will necessarily work in the show, but I do think that it would be, interesting for 20 minutes or 30 minutes and maybe an hour if there's enough questions. And then what we'll do is we'll schedule those and let people know when those are happening. So stay tuned for more of that. Thank you to the panelists. A great conversation in the first hour and the second hour. Can't do this without you. And thanks to the incredible producers out there asking all the questions. We are sending more and more questions back just because more and more of you are asking questions. Remember, if there are QR code questions, we'll bring them back in. If they are your own questions, just remember that they don't go away. They get put into your notes inside of your account, inside of Makana. So you can always bring them back, and please do. We just only get to a certain number every day. And so bring them back, and we'll continue to give them a shot. So and get them in there. So we're going as fast as we can. So we have, part of the reason we're pushing more back right now is because there was a lot of requests for us to slow down a little bit and chew on the questions a little bit more, which we've done, which I think has made a better show. I do think that it's, we were, to give you a sense of it, for a little inside baseball, since we have an extra minute, is that, we used to do about 25, 26 questions an hour, and we're now doing about 12 or 14 questions an hour and just allowing it to roll a little bit slower as it goes through that. Let us know in the, on Sundays or in Discord in RFIs whether you like that or not. Are we going fast enough? Are we going too fast, or is it just right? Let us know what you think of those things, but we're constantly kind of tweaking that. But that's been a pretty conscious decision to allow the conversation to slow down and dig into those questions a little bit more. But it does mean that we don't get to as many per day. Thank you to the incredible team on the back end. There's a team here that every single day that is putting together the show. They're volunteering their time to put together the show. It's a small village that lights up every day to make this happen. There is an incredible dev team that is constantly evolving how this all works, and a management team that's also a dev team that's building really. The complexity of some of the G docs and everything else that's being put together to manage all of this is quite a thing. So just really incredible work by everyone. We really appreciate the effort it takes to do the show every single day. We traveled 62,000 miles today, 100,000 kilometers, and that's 493 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into after hours.
Is that considered our banana footprint? As opposed to
the banana footprint, but no, it's the potassium footprint. It's not. I don't want to limit it to bananas. We could be using papayas. I think there's a certain amount of potassium in papayas.
We're using far too much potassium.
Yeah, there you go. The reminder, if anyone's still watching, that the Michael Krasny show will be on at 11. We have Helen Blau, she basically was the person who figured out what we now base all stem cell theory on top of. Pretty excited about that one. So anyway.
And where would one go to tune that in?
We'll post a place to take a look at it in office hours. So just watch the announcements, and I'll post the link for all of you. All right, thanks everybody.
Gracias.
I'm going to go have a cheese stick. See ya.
Philly.
Band on the run.